Okay, so let's talk about the limits of monetary expansion. What we've seen is that the central bank can increase the money supply, and in the short run, they can increase a number of real economic variables. For example, well, not increase, they can also decrease because, well, they affected the real interest rate, they affected output, they affected labor, and they affected wages. Right, in the long run, well, this guy ends up remaining unchanged, put a bar over it. Output remains unchanged, put a bar over it. Labor remains unchanged. Wages remain unchanged. Everything goes back to where it was. So why can't the central bank just do this again? I mean, it's awesome they did it once, right? So if they did it once, clearly they can just do it again, because why the hell not? Right? So let's go ahead and we'll do this. I'm going to erase some of this stuff here. Like this. Helps it doesn't look too messy. See, markers even suck at home. Right, so what I'm doing is I'm erasing the short run responses from this model, because we are going to see exactly what happens if we try to do this again. Right, because naturally if the central bank had evidence that they could make this work all the time, naturally they would just be doing this all the time, right? Which, okay, cool. We can just keep doing this, and there'd be no reason to stop doing this. So why don't they do this all the time? Well, the reason they don't do this all the time is, like I said, there are quote-unquote limits to monetary expansion. Because in the long run, everything takes us back to where we were. Okay. So, I guess I'm going to erase this original aggregate demand as well. All right, so now this is where the only thing I've got left from the initial equilibrium is that initial price level, or the initial expected price level that we had. Right? Now, what we want to do is initiate another monetary policy shock. Okay, so let's do that. Let's see what happens. So there's a monetary policy shock. It's the exact same thing that happened the first time. I'm going to call this LM3, and we're going to do it in red because red is bad, like Danger, Will Robinson, which is a show that, well, your parents might have watched. At this point, your parents might have actually been too young to watch it, and it was one of my parents that watched it, who are probably old enough to be your parents. Well, if we follow what happens here, LM curve shifts out because the money supply goes up again. So there's a shift in the LM curve. Now, as that happens, aggregate demand shifts out. Now, some prices are flexible, but not all of them. Now, firms got to update their prices last time, right? Cool. So we'll call this PT3. Like that. Right, well, okay. Let's see what happens. Well, we can just trace all this out. Oh, awesome. Hey, what do you know? We increased stuff again. Right, well, recall that even though we did increase, or we did decrease the real interest rate initially, the LM curve has to shift back in because some prices go up. Like that. Right, and this is our short-run equilibrium, which really looks a lot like the short-run equilibrium we had before, right? Just maybe a little bit higher up in that price level with the aggregate demand, aggregate supply stuff. Okay. So in the short run, all this stuff changes again, but what happens? Well, in the long run, everything returns back to where it was. Yes. LM curve shifts all the way back to where it was. So we've got LM4, we'll say, equals LM2 equals LM. Right, which means that now the short run aggregate supply curve is going to shift up again. So short run aggregate supply 3. Like this. Everything shifts back down. Trying to draw. So all this stuff shifts back. Labor demand's going to shift back, which then means the long run wage rate is equal to the long run response in wages means that the wage rate we end up with, and it's the wage rate we started with, the output we end up with is the output we started with, the real interest rate we end up with is the real interest rate we started with. Okay. That's not too bad, is it? I mean, all that happened was we just increased prices again, right? But if you look, every single time we do this, the expected price level is going to increase. What that translates out to, and less econ and more English, is that, excuse me, I've got to sit down, I'm still kind of ill. What that translates to is that in the long run, as firms get to update their prices, well, they're going to see, based on what's happened before, the monetary authority basically pulling some shit And they're going to go, you've been doing this a lot, and we're not happy with that. So they set the expected price level even higher. And as they set the expected price level even higher, what that means is that they're going to go, all right, we expect to really get screwed over later. And because we expect to get screwed over later, we're going to set our expected price level higher than what it was. So the more you screw with the money supply, the more we're going to screw with the expected price level to make sure that we can cover our own asses. And when that happens, as the expected price level keeps going up, if prices keep increasing, what's that called? Well, that's called inflation. Inflation is not good, right? Especially if we have high inflation and no change in output. So we can have short-run changes in output, but the issue is going to be the more we do this, or the more the central bank does this, the more the not American economy, because any economy really, the more the economy is going to adjust, plan ahead, raise the expected price level, therefore ultimately offsetting any potential gains the central bank could be facing by instituting consistently expansionary monetary policy. So we can do it a little bit, but the more we do it, the worse it is. So what we want to do is make sure that we engage in monetary policy in a way that's expansionary when it needs to be and not expansionary when it doesn't need to be. So that is a short lecture on the limits to monetary expansion. Thank you.